The back extension, when done correctly, is a great glute and upper hamstring movement. However, in part because of the name, people tend to do it a little incorrectly. So we want to think of this movement as a bit more of a glute extension than a spinal extension. And that's the first way in which it goes wrong. There's a few ways of doing this movement. I'm going to demo you 3 different ones. A normal neutral spine back extension, a glute focused back extension, and then one involving a band for added resistance, which makes it harder as we get to that top position. So the first one is a bog standard back extension. The first bit with any of these is that this hip pad needs to be lower than my hip joint. A lot of you will set it up too high and it'll be along the top of the pelvis. We then can't move freely around the hip joint. We then have to move at the spine because this is locked in a position. This needs to be lower than that in order for us to move around the ball and socket joint that is your hip. So when I line up here, this needs to be lower than here. Okay? So that's the first bit. From there, I'm going to treat it much like an RDL. I'm going to hinge over with a neutral spine, big tall chest, until I find a stretch in my hamstrings. From here, without moving my spine, I'm going to squeeze up with my hamstrings and lower glutes until I'm bolt upright here. What I haven't done is mermaid at the front of a ship, right? I am not there to present like Kate Winslet in Titanic. This is locked in the position. My spine, therefore, when I go through this range, does not really move. It's just holding me in position. And that way, I can make the upper hamstrings and lower glutes do all of the work. The reason that people tend to be like, oh, it really burns my lower back, is they do this. Round, round. Now, that is a type of movement, but it's spinal flexion and extension. So if you were trying to develop your erector spinae muscles, those muscles that run up along the vertebrae themselves, then yes, you would want to go through flexion and extension. But if we're trying to target lower down, we've got to go neutral spine, hinge, and squeeze back up. You can use, just like I am, my hands to make sure I'm in the right position through this, and I'm not moving in places I don't want to move. Okay, so the next one is a glute-focused back extension, and we're going to take out the spine's ability to flex and extend in this by getting into full flexion. I'm also, before I set up, just going to turn my feet out to about a 45-degree angle, so that in here, what that does is just shift my femur into a little external rotation and a little greater abduction, which helps to shorten mainly glute medius and minimus, although a little bit of glute max in there as well. From this position, I'm going to curl myself into a ball, so I shouldn't be able to get my spine into any more of a ball. This is then not going to change position throughout this. I'm going to hinge over, maintain my spinal flexion and extension, so this does not move. I'm keeping my crunch, and I'm getting that right from here. I go down, and I come up and clench. And the key really is that I'm keeping my ribs fixed to my pelvis throughout this movement, and again, this lower glute, upper hamstring area really starts to burn quite quickly in this variation. Although you will also find a little bit of upper glute more in this than you will in the neutral version of the back extension. Once you've mastered the neutral and the glute focused back extension, we can make this more difficult with the use of bands. So with this, I've just set up a band around the bottom of the back extension itself. From here, I'm going to just work my way into position. This can be a little difficult if you're in by yourself. You can either put this around the neck, or if you've got someone to pass it to you, you can get it a little lower down across the spine a little bit. I prefer this position, but it is harder to get into by yourself. We'll start with the neutral version of this back extension. So I'm still in my hinge position, and I'm coming up and clenching. And again, I'm just trying to make sure that my spine stays still as I squeeze up and down on this. If I went into the glute focused back extension, pull this just in a position, I'm going to curl into my ball, turn my 45 degrees. And there we have an easy way to make any of your back extensions a little bit harder.